Oh, people are in.
Yeah, hello everyone. Apologies for the wait. we had some video lag issues, and we wanted to make sure that y'all could see and hear us okay before we start letting folks in. But yeah, if you can just keep yourself muted, that'll help the broadband throughout the nation. We have some wonderful folks here joining us from all over the country. So keep yourself muted so the audio is okay and everybody can hear us. And we are just continuing to let folks in.
You guys hear me okay?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. I came upstairs, so I think that the service will be better.
Is that better, Ace? Okay. All right, I say we go ahead and get started. We're all here. Beautiful. Well, thanks again, everybody, for joining. My name is Alyssa Quinton. I am a community organizer here in Fairbanks, Alaska with the Alaska Center. And this is our POC webinar about sustainability and zero waste from the perspective of women of color here, not just in Alaska, but all over the country. And so I'm very excited that all of you can come and be a part of this discussion and be able to share our time together. Before we get into the good stuff, I want to do a land acknowledgement here that I am on the ancestral and unceded territories of the Chee-Nau-Dene, Lower Tanana people in Tanana, otherwise known as Fairbanks, and that we are all currently on unceded land and territories throughout this country. And it is so, so important to recognize, acknowledge, and celebrate that, because it was that continued stewardship and knowledge that made the places that we call home, home, especially in the conversation of sustainability and zero waste, and really understanding what it is to be in relation to the earth and all that it gives us. Today, I'm gonna share my screen so folks can sort of know what we are talking about here. But we will essentially, oh, that's not what I'm supposed to do. Let me stop sharing my screen because that's not working. We're gonna go through some intros here. So I'll just have the participants introduce themselves, and we'll get into the nitty gritty. How does that sound, everybody? Great, let's do it.
Hi, everyone. My name is Salenta. I'm originally from Los Angeles, California, but I'm representing Brooklyn, New York, because that's where I currently live. And I'm an aspiring Black farmer, as well as herbalist. Sweet.
Can everyone hear me? Okay, perfect. My name is Aloe. I live in Atlanta, and I am an environmental engineer and green space designer here. And my focus is on urban forestry and landscape maintenance, and habitat restoration. I'm gonna keep me on mute though, because I live in the city and y'all are gonna hear several sirens, okay?
Same.
Hi everyone, my name's Eyes. I'm a Black Asian American. I prioritize minimalism, recycling, zero waste, and sustainable living. I live in Fayetteville, Georgia right now, but I was previously in Alaska.
You kind of cut out. Can you hear us?
Sustainability has definitely helped me prioritize wellness in a lot of ways.
Okay, are you hearing us okay still, Eyes? Okay, yeah, sorry folks, we have just, broadband is real, it's a thing, we need more of it. Okay, so I think I figured out sharing the screen here that is going to work properly now, instead of not being nice to me. So I think it's really important for us to really know exactly what we're talking about. And when we are talking about sustainability, this is a really good definition that a lot of folks that do this work like to use, but really focusing on meeting the needs of ourselves present day without compromising the ability for future generations to meet their needs. In the means of responsible production, in responsible, resource development and agriculture, making sure that the things that we are taking from the earth and putting back onto the earth is going to be good for all beings. And when we're really talking about zero waste, it's really thinking about the management and conservation of the resources that we're using. So the same sort of thing of thinking about, what we're taking from the earth and what we're putting back onto the earth by production, by consumption, really thinking about how we are reusing and using the products that we come into contact with to survive on this earth. And making sure that what we're putting back onto the earth isn't threatening the health of all beings, not just human beings, animals, plants, bugs, all of us are, on the earth together. And so what are we doing to make sure that those interactions are not being threatened by one or more things that we might be contributing? We just wanted to give you that context, especially if you're coming into this space with a little bit of knowledge, but wanting to get us all on the same page of what we're wanting to talk about here. Really what we're going to with that get into is our jobs and how we sort of came into this work and what it really means for people of color, because we recognize that in those spaces that we are and the spaces that we work, there's so many layers that come with it, as being a woman of color, immigrant, whatever it is, there's layers that affect that. And it's so important to recognize that, because, who do you see the face of as sustainability? It's usually white men, when Black women and Black people have always had a space, especially in the environmental justice and sustainable work fields and movements. So that's what we want to share with all of you of what this really means and what this really looks like to us. I'm going to be facilitating the conversation, so you'll hear me pop in, pop back out. But I really want to highlight our guests and our sustainability baddies that we have here, be able to share their knowledge and experience with us. So what does all of this look like to you in your respected fields and your experiences and the work that you do now?
Okay. I almost clicked the wrong button. So because I work in urban forestry, sustainability is pretty much everything. You know, it's about that balance between society and nature. And when you're in a city, you lose the nature aspect. So we plant trees and we plant shrubs and grasses that give you the feel of being a little bit disconnected from a city. Um, when it comes to sustainability, it's very hard to find the harmony when a lot of underdeveloped areas in cities are, and I'm going to be real honest when I say this, there's a lot of areas that are full of Black people that don't get the same attention as other parts of the cities. And especially here in Atlanta, we do have a lot of historically Black neighborhoods that are suffering because they're not being treated with the same integrity and care as the white neighborhoods. There's not a lot of trees. There's a lot of invasive species. The air quality is not the same. And so my work focuses on those areas. How can I give a better environmental health aspect to these Black people and people of color? But I do want to point out a lot of my work is restorative work. And the difference between restoration and sustainability is that the restoration aspect is the maintenance. It's the hands-on maintenance and making things better. You're restoring, you're renewing damaged areas. And a lot of those damaged areas happen to be in minority neighborhoods. So with that, the goal of urban forestry is to create and manage these public lands and these private lands. And because 130 million trees in America are in these cities and in these urban areas, it's important that we take care of those trees. And that's when we get into arboriculture and botany and horticulture. But the basis of that work is to restore these areas and give a better quality of life to people of color and to Black people. So that's what my work focuses on. I'll put this back on mute now.
Oh, that was beautiful. Once again, for those who just entered, my name is Salenta. And I said in my intro that I am aspiring to be a young Black farmer. My inspiration comes from many generations of people in my family who were farmers and who are farmers. I'm currently, I don't know if you can see this, but I'm wearing a shirt that says Maiden Rock Winery and Cidery. It's my uncle's apple orchard he has in a small town in Wisconsin, in Stockholm. If you're ever in the area, I highly recommend visiting. It's really inspirational and beautiful because he owns 88 acres of land, and it's just rows and rows of different variations of apple trees. And through him and some other relatives, it inspired me to work more with the earth and to
Did we just lose one of our panelists? Oh, how dare the internet. That is so rude. Okay, well, I am going to check in with Salenta, get them back in. Ice, do you want to go in the meantime?
Yes, I can totally. Okay, so for everyone that just entered, my name's Eyes. I have done a lot of work in gardening and botany. When I worked in Fairbanks, I was trying to organize a plant program, and while studying psychology, I've really been looking into how nature affects your mental health and how restriction from nature can deplete your mental health and environmental racism. So I was working on getting a program up and running for students where we integrate more wildlife in terms of plants into the student population in terms of like dorms and student spaces, because something that is, it's not, of course, not unique to Alaska, but something that Alaskans really do suffer with is seasonal depression in the winter. So trying to get more greenery in those hard, long months of winter so that students can have those productivity boost that plants can provide, and also just helping students learn how to caretake, because through my learning in gardening, I worked on a homestead, my parents owned one, and I've learned a lot of patience and a lot of just how to care give something living, and how to really just outline what providing for a family looks like through hard work in gardening. My parents are immigrants. They're from Barbados and St. Lucia. So my background in sustainability has always been how to provide for your family and remote living. Something that my father, being ex-military, taught me a lot, was just how to actually make Black people safe in sustainability, and using that to cultivate more of a grounding in community.
As I think you cut out again. Can you still hear us?
Did mine cut off too?
A little bit, yeah. The last part that you said.
What did I say last?
Father being ex-military.
Okay.
I would try leaving and coming back.
Here. You guys still hear me? It's okay?
I cannot hear anything.
They cut out again. I just heard you just now. Do you want to do it one more time?
Oh no, I'm so sorry. Okay, I muted and unmuted. Let's see. Did that help?
I can hear you pretty good now. Okay, let's try one more time. I'm keeping my fingers crossed.
All right. My parents were immigrants, and in America, you don't have access to fruit trees. You don't, and there's a lot of really silly laws preventing people from having the same quality of life and having the same access to gardening that you have in the island. Am I still breaking up?
A little bit, but just a little bit at that point. I do not know what is going on with our internet. Just
so sorry, guys.
It is kicking out my dang panelists. We can't hear you. We have a talk with this internet. But Solenta is back. We have you again.
Oh man. Okay, well, let me just try to shorten mine a little bit, just so that you guys can, we can move on back to Solenta. I've worked in upcycling. I've done a lot of thrift shop work.
We can't hear you again.
Here, how about this? Do you want to join? Do you want to rejoin again? And do you want to write stuff in the chat? And we'll have Solenta go in the meantime. Does that work?
That's totally fine. I will exit and come back.
Okay.
Hi, everyone. Sorry about that. I have no idea what just happened, but I'm back. As I was saying, my uncle owns a farm in Wisconsin, and it inspired me to work more with the earth. I also have been an assistant for an herbalist in the past, and through working with these two different people, I realized, and they're both Black, that there needs to be more representation of Black people when it comes to herbal farming, when it comes to farming, period, or gardening, because like Alyssa was saying earlier, and also Aloe, there's not, when you think about sustainability when it comes to working with the earth, it's not perceived from the Black perspective. where a lot of our ancestors have worked with the earth. A lot of our ancestors helped build the country that we live in currently and other countries. So it's almost embedded in our DNA to work with the earth. And the earth gives us everything we need. So working with the earth and working with the earth in order to receive food or herbs that help heal us. My goal is to be able to, I just moved into a new space that has a backyard where I can start farming more and expand. And I want to be able to, if my friends are like, Salenta, I have a headache, I can be like, drink this herb or eat this herb with some water, or I'm having vaginal issues, here's this herb that'll help with that, as well as your brain function, etc. Because I feel like that knowledge isn't as widespread as it should be. And I feel as though if more Black people who live in urban cities and those who don't learned more about farming and the benefits of gardening, then it would help the earth, it would help them be this really beautiful cycle. And it will also be very good for our mental health. Working with the earth is very good for our mental health and our spirits and our emotions. There's something about touching soil and being able to communicate with a plant and understand what that plant needs. More sun, less water, more water, less sun, etc., or a balance of the two is very beautiful, and it requires patience and time. And time becomes like non-existent. So I also think that would benefit a lot of Black people's mental health and just overall health in general, physically, spiritually, emotionally, and mentally. So yeah, I'm just here to continue to spread the knowledge of the goodness of the earth.
I like that y'all touched on mental health because, especially in city environments, it's necessary to have these green spaces that promote active lifestyles too, because that physical health also ties right back into the mental health. And it also reduces health risks in the youth and in the elderly when they have access to clean air. And I was listening to this podcast. I want to say it's an NPR podcast, and I cannot remember the name right now, but they did an episode on green spaces in urban areas. And they talked about how a lot of the times, even if it's just a balcony and you can look out and see trees, that will brighten your mood just as if you were out going on a hike, just because you have that connection. So it's really important that we, as Black people and as people of color, we come together and we put these areas in cities and in environments that don't necessarily have that. I live in the city, and Atlanta is a very, very green city, known as the city in the trees or city in the forest. But there are still a lot of places around here that don't have the same luxury of, being able to go outside and experience nature. So I like that you talked on mental health, just because that is definitely something that's overlooked, the parallels between psychology and wellness and outdoor education too. That's very important.
Can you guys hear me okay? Okay. I want to touch on what Aloe was just talking about too. That's something that when I was working at REI, and getting into outdoor education and, how to preserve national parks, mental health, and that's why I'm studying psychology, is because the intersection between mental health and nature and accessibility to nature and environmental racism means a lot to me as a Black person, because Black people are so consistently restricted from these hikes, these yoga, resorts, these really beautiful experiences. Things like even vacationing has been restricted from Black people because, due to class disparities, Black people are not allowed to vacation as often. And you're not allowed to go, you have to go pay to go, have a hike. You can't just, you have to also pay someone to take you so that that hike can be, safe because of, wildlife. So it's just the way that nature has become inaccessible to Black people, honestly, and how it's unnatural for living beings to not have access to nature, and how we're going to, fight back against all of these rules that is preventing, just young boys and girls from learning how to swim, going on, outdoor, like learning things like archery, and how we're going to stop the racism in these fields. Because when I did work at REI, I was the only dark-skinned woman in my job, and everyone treated me like I didn't know anything. I had a lot of those customers, and this was the REI in Fairbanks, Alaska, a lot of customers that would walk in and they walked past me, and they just assumed. No one asked me what I did. No one asked me, what my education in outdoor recreation was. No one knew that I was a cyclist, and I committed to sustainability by not having a car, and I rode my bike to work every day, and I continued doing that even when I was pregnant. So like my commitment to sustainability has gone so far in my life, but people see my skin color and they just assume, oh, Black, they don't know anything about nature. And it's just like, that belief inherently erases Indigenous people and all African cultures, because our roots are nature. Like, we are connected to nature, and that is our ancestry, and it always has been. And it's only through colonization that these things have been removed, and now we have to relearn things that were already in our culture to begin with. And these experiences have definitely been very unfair, which is one reason why I, stopped working in the outdoor recreation fields, is just because it's really like, you're up against white men. And at the end of the day, white men think they know everything. And when you're a Black woman, no one wants to hear you talk. And when you attempt to have a voice as a Black woman in these fields, you're seen as the angry Black person, and no one wants to respect you as just genuinely educated and someone that actually knows what they're talking about. And one of the barriers that I face is that no one wanted to propel me. Like, they would have these, leadership seminars, and people would get, flown to different states to do things, and no one was looking at me to do those things. No one was like, hey, Eyes, what do you do? Like, I want to know, what have you done in cycling? What do you
Are you cut out again? I'm gonna seriously put some hands on the internet. Stop messing with my girl. Can you hear us? I don't think she can hear us.
I cut out, huh?
Okay, I can hear you again.
When did I cut out?
You were on it. You were talking about how, people just don't see Black women and don't want to listen to Black women
Yeah, and they just don't even ask questions. Like, people just are not curious about the Black experience because they just don't think you know anything. And it's just inherently racist. And it's one reason why I've just kind of stepped back a lot of the time, and I'm like, okay, how can I make sustainability more Black centered in my life? It's made me want to stop interacting with white people in sustainability, honestly, because I'm just like, I already understand that you're not going to listen to me. Let me go somewhere where I'm appreciated.
I do want to comment on that because I have a completely different experience, and just to, give a more well-rounded perspective on sustainability, I do want to touch on my personal experience. Just working in various states and working in different nature centers and for different organizations and companies. I think that my approach to sustainability has been, because I am a Black woman, I already have a different perspective on nature. Just because I'm already pulling from my culture, I'm pulling from what I grew up learning, I'm pulling from all of these different experiences that no one else can have but me. And so I always put my perspective at the forefront of these encounters with people who won't necessarily see me in nature fields. And to tie that back in with the whole topic of sustainability and why we are doing this, it's because we do have these powerful voices. And instead of us seeking approval or validation, we have the power, we have all of the resources to do it ourselves. And that's kind of what I like to focus on. I like to focus on the fact that I can do it. If you listen, that's great. If you don't listen, that's on you too. Like I'm really just wanting to expand the minds of people who respect me. And that is why I take up so much space in this field. And that's why I have a very bold and aggressive approach to sustainability and engineering as a whole. There's a lot more people in here now than when I started. My name is Aloe, by the way. So yeah, I just wanted to touch on that. But I really appreciate you for sharing that too. And someone put in the chat, the podcast I was talking about, it's called Hidden Brain. And it was a podcast about green spaces. This particular episode. They did drop a link as well. So if you have some time today, I highly recommend listening to that.
Thank you both. Solenta, do you have anything that you want to add? Yeah, no, that's really okay. Let me go grab my baby because I want to share this with you. I want to share this with you all, with our panelists and our guests. Look at my baby. Look at my baby. This is my aloe plant. She is 3 years old. She's thick with a Q. You understand? And the reason I show you my baby is because Eyes and I have very similar upbringing. I'm a Bayesian American as well. Parents were immigrants. Dad was in the military, and my connection to sustainability wasn't necessarily in my job, but just a part of our lives. Like, you know, anybody that lives in Fairbanks, you go on, if you know where Jack Street is, you see my mama's house. She got a garden. Every year she got a garden, and every year neighbors be going over there. They'd be like, look at these tomatoes. We gotta fight off the neighbors because they're trying to pick the tomatoes and all of our plants early. But that was just always part of my upbringing. Was it was exactly that. It was taking care of not just our families, it was taking care of our community. I remember going home, and you know, you walk probably a block down to the fish market in Oystons, and you have all of this fish, all of these, you know, all of the markets, all the bread, and what that meant was community. And so you knew the bread maker, and you knew the bread maker's son, you knew where he went to school, you knew the fishmonger, and you knew that that one was a little bit stingy, but if you went 2 stalls over, you get the nice little Rasta man that, you know, that likes you a little bit more, and you can get a pound of saltfish for a little bit cheaper. And so I always try to think of what that means for myself as a Black American person in this country, but as a Bayesian woman, as a West Indian woman, and how do I connect those things, and how do I make it easier for other, you know, first gen Caribbean people in this country to bring that knowledge here, to share it with us, so that, you know, in these spaces that are restricted, in these spaces that are colonized, where, you know, we can't even feel like our full selves, what are those avenues in which we can, you know, break down those doors and be able to find those other channels to finally make it safe for us. So we've been touching on that, and really what I would love to hear from you all is, what is that connection that we have to our nature? I think that, you know, people don't know that, you know, from West Indian perspective, from a Black perspective, what does that actually look like to us? What does it mean for us not just to be in these spaces, but when we have like a huge ass aloe plant, like, you know, what does that mean? What is that connection? Because I think it's that lack of understanding that aids in the discrimination and the restriction and just the ignorance that people have surrounding Black people and our knowledge and our wisdom that we have with these plants. So that's the question I want to bring to you all.
Like I was saying a little bit earlier, for those who weren't here, that working with nature is, specifically to me, but also to many all of us, all Black people and Indigenous people, it's like embedded in our DNA. Our ancestors really work with nature. My name is Salenta, and if you break it down, lenta is like lentil, which is a root. And I learned that sal was like a type of tree that a certain native tribe used to just like pray around. So my whole first name has to do with nature. And my great aunt who named me really thought about that. And that's how I received my name. I had to learn about my name as I got older. I didn't know that when I was younger, but she wanted to make sure that the nature aspect still stayed within our family. So she named me Salenta. And to go even further, of it being embedded in our DNA, like if you told me 10 years ago that I would be doing stuff like this, working with nature, having lots of plants in my house and outside, I'd be like, I don't know what you're talking about. I wasn't really in tune with it. But the more I learned, the more I adapted. And I feel like spiritually, it depends on your beliefs, of course, and your practices, but like, for me personally, I cannot ignore it. Like, I cannot ignore working with nature because I feel like nature is my ancestor. I feel like the trees aren't just trees. I feel like they're ancient ancestors that we've been blessed to have and be around. They provide so much for the earth in pollination, in just the overall cycle, shade, all the good stuff. It attracts, and yeah, I feel as though it's the spiritual aspect of working with nature sometimes isn't spoken about, but that's also because not everyone has the same beliefs, which is fine, but I feel like Black, brown, Indigenous people work a lot with the earth because that was just really part of our culture. If we were hungry, we would go to the tree and pick a mango, or we'd go fishing, or we'd, grow the crop, some grain and eat it. We'd always go to nature for the things that we needed to fulfill us. And that part of nature, I feel like, has been removed from us. We're not taught that. McDonald's is accessible, easy. There's a McDonald's on every other block in New York City. And any state you go to, I guarantee you'll be able to find a McDonald's before you're able to find like a solid grocery store or farmer's market with vegetables and fruits. So also the education aspect of educating our peers and our people of farming and gardening so that we can return back to our roots and do that as well. I kind of lost my train of thought, but it was definitely going on that route of just like returning back to our roots. And I feel like the more that we invest in working with nature and plants, the spiritual aspect opens up as well. And for those who don't, dive into that side, like that's fine. But for those that do, you may know exactly what I'm talking about when I say that. The communication with plants and trees and life, you learn that they're not just plants, they have life. And you're consuming something or working with something that is just as alive as you are. So yeah, that's all I wanted to say.
I do want to touch on what Salenta was saying about reconnecting with nature. The disconnect comes from before 1900, majority of African Americans were enslaved in the South. They were enslaved in these rural areas. They were enslaved in nature. And so when they were freed and they went up north to these cities, there wasn't a lot of nature. And so the disconnect comes from that sentiment of it was a traumatic event, you know? And so I get why the disconnect is spreading. And so when we think about rewilding and when we think about reconnecting, we have to take into consideration that most people are from these areas where nature was not at the forefront of their minds. And so Black people have to think back to times before slavery and times before their ancestors were in these environments. Because once you tap into that, you won't look at nature as this burden. And I say that because I've talked to a few people who still think like that, a few elders who still think like that. And it is very unfortunate, but I think that the work will definitely start on a smaller scale, like community gardens, community farms, just to get that one-on-one interaction with the earth. And from there, we can expand and develop food forests and islands and things like that. But yeah, I think that's why there's such a disconnect between African Americans and the environment. And it's also really, really sad because when you are seen in the field of environmental science or, you know, outdoor education, there is that label over your head like, oh, this is for white people. And so we have to work to correct that. You know, like me going on a hike and kayaking is not me doing a white people activity. And just changing that narrative alone will open up a lot more opportunities for Black people to get more involved. Yeah.
Yes, just coming off of what Ala was saying. Oh, sorry, Ice, go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead, Salenta. I'll talk right after you.
Okay, I was gonna say, just like, yeah, canoeing and hiking. When we started this conversation, I said that I live in Brooklyn, but I'm originally from Los Angeles, California. And my sisters and I would go on hikes all the time and nature walks deep in the mountains. And one time a Black ranger stopped us, and because we were doing something silly. We were lighting sage, and you're not supposed to light things when you're in the woods. So we were a little naive, but she stopped us to tell us to put out the sage, but also to say like, wow, she never sees Black people in this area hiking. And we had this long conversation about how she wishes that she saw more of Black people hiking like this. And just in the woods and in nature more, because it's usually just white people that she saw. And then she encouraged us to apply to be a forest ranger because there aren't that many Black femme forest rangers. So, or Black forest rangers, period. And that got me excited because that's a job I never thought about ever pursuing or thinking about, but I'm like, maybe that's something I can do like once I'm like in an environment where I can do something like that. But she was telling us how much she loved being a forest ranger and the discrimination she receives being a Black forest ranger as well. Because like Ice was saying when Ice was working at REI, same thing for her, even though this woman has the whole uniform on that says that she's a forest ranger. People wouldn't even acknowledge that or would ask to speak to somebody else. And so she would tell us all these stories, but then also the beauty behind the work as well, and how she always gets to work with the earth and how that made her feel. And we got to speak about our ancestors and the history and etc. So yeah, the imagery of more Black people hiking, more Black people canoeing, more Black people doing all kinds of things with the earth is very important, especially now with like social media and like the digital age, you know. I feel like that aspect needs to be like pushed even more if possible, so that the younger generation sees, oh, I can do this too. I don't have to not. It is cool to work with nature. It is cool to go kayaking, hiking, kayaking, canoeing, and hiking. And it's not just for one specific type of person. It's for everybody. So go ahead, Ice. Sorry.
Yeah, to touch on some of what Salenta was just saying, that was really beautiful. But for me, that's one of my biggest goals is how to make Black youth feel welcome in these industries. And of course, like, we need the help of the people that are already dominant in this industry, to bring us into these spaces and to already acknowledge that there are Black leaders and there are people that are already hiking and that are already canoeing, and but why are they so hidden, And like, we can't keep saying that Black people are just not doing it, because there are a lot of Black people that are invested in, doing things in outdoor recreation. They're just not getting the same visibility because their look isn't marketable at the end of the day. But we need that to be combated at this point, because it is, affecting the mental health of oppressed and marginalized people to not have access to nature and to not be able to take a break. And especially in, neighborhoods where there's a lot of crime and there's just a lot of, like, warfare, like, not being able to get a break from that environment and not even being able to feel safe in your neighborhood. Like, there's neighborhoods in America where Black kids can't even go on walks and they can't go outside, like, they can't go down the block. And it's 100% detrimental to their mental health, because when you can't even have access to physical activity. So then we look at, how is that affecting our health and genetics, and how is it affecting, our bloodline, the fact that our people can't go outside and go for a jog, and, and when Black people are getting killed when they're going on jogs too, like, how do we stop the violence and make these things more accessible so that Black people do feel safe pursuing, outdoor recreation in all aspects, in whether it's in their neighborhoods or not. And with me, my background in just being from West Indian parents, plants and working with herbs has always been in my blood. Like, I grew up with a mom that, really cared about gardening, a dad that really cared about gardening. So home remedies was something that I always was really, really, really drawn to and really, really educated on, like, making my own teas, harvesting my own herbs. So that's why I got into foraging and, being able to educate other people on indigenous herbs and things that they can find in their local, like, park that are safe for them to eat, and, like, decolonizing these mentalities that things like dandelion, you can go, make tea, like, just introducing this education back to people so that people understand that there are so many useful things that we're just completely ignoring, and we're basically whitewashing all of these, indigenous herbs and then selling it back to people in the grocery store. And for me, it's always been about
Oh, I think you cut out again.
develop things like tinctures. It's extremely, it's easy in terms of the methods to learn it, but it's not being taught to people, and it's restricting us from having the wellness that we rightfully deserve, and that is indigenous to our culture at the end of the day.
Oh, did someone have a question?
Did I cut off when I was talking?
You did
Yeah.
for a bit, at least for me. But
Oh man, you know what?
but I think if other folks heard you, then that's good.
Okay.
George has their hand up.
Hey, so yeah, I felt like, I want to put a little chime into the whole conversation, I guess, that whole thing. Well, I guess I'm George. I stay in Stone Mountain. It's a part of Metro Atlanta, and I do software engineering. So not really too much to do with foresting. I mean, with forestry and farming, but I feel like I've watched enough too many documentaries, so I feel like I know a general thing. The big thing is, like, I guess where the disconnection comes from, because he was asked, like, what disconnected us from it and what's bringing us back. So I think like the disconnect is just like, you know, after the whole slavery thing, I think it's kind of like, yeah, I'm not trying to grow no more fruit. I'm not trying to pick like no other uh plants. I'm not trying to do any kind of harvesting things because I've done that for free for who knows how long. That's been like the thing that has like kind of like the reason that people were taken from their original lands and like spread across the United States. It's not like I don't really want to deal with that anymore. So we're just going to separate from that. Like all the things that deal with that, we're not going to worry about it. Going hiking through forests is kind of like, you know, escaping the whole slavery thing, not really something that you would just do recreationally or just like, yeah, let's just act like we're escaping slavery for fun. Like nobody's going to try and do that. So like a lot of these tasks are something that people used to do, but then like when they had to do it, it was kind of by force. So they probably didn't want to like just keep doing it recreationally. They were like, okay, we can try and figure out other things that we're good at. As far as what's like brought us back, it's kind of like you know how they say that it's embedded in our culture kind of thing. And like in that sense, it's not necessarily like that's something that's always been in us, but it's kind of like that's the one thing that we kind of have left. Like, you know, when they took them from their original lands, one of the only things that you can bring with you was kind of like seeds to like continue growing things that you can eat. And so we kind of like had to revisit that, just say, okay, you know, these are the things that connect us to that part of our culture. And so it's kind of everybody trying to figure out where they're like where they come from, in the sense of like, you know, how 23andMe is saying, oh yeah, you're 5% Scandinavian and 17% South African or something like that. So it's kind of like understanding that you do have like an origin that's somewhat traceable, and trying to get back to that is like what's bringing everybody back to growing their own stuff. Uh, and also, I guess, quarantine, because everybody's like, oh, well, if flour goes out this fast, maybe I should try and figure out that, you know, a way to eat without having to rely on a grocery store, because they're not the most reliable in that sense.
Yeah, thank you so much, George. I'm happy that you were able to share that. You know, it's real. We have a lot of pain and a lot of trauma in our communities, in the Black community, and trying to find a way to reconnect and be in relation with this earth is traumatizing, because we honestly, especially in this country, have not been given space to really heal from that. We've just been asked to, okay, you're emancipated, so there you go. Okay, now you can, you know, kind of get a job. Okay, you can kind of get a house. Okay, you can kind of get, okay, you can kind of vote, but you know, we've just been asked to move along, move along, move along. And so we have to, not just we in the Black community, but we collectively, especially white people, really have to find ways to make it safe, obviously, first of all, but make that process, help us make that process healing, and give us that space to find how we hike in a good way, how we kayak in a good way. Because I will tell you, I'm the only Asian person I know who's afraid of a boat. I mean, like when people are on an island and I just do not trust boats, I don't trust them. They sink. And someone was like, Alyssa, well, it could be, you know, your great 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 grandmama telling you, if you go on that boat, you ain't coming back. Because that's what used to happen. You know, you get on that boat, you weren't coming back. And I didn't think of that, of like, honestly, I think for me, it's an irrational fear. I just don't like boats and don't like sinking. But, you know, I never had that perspective of, oh yeah, that could be some historical trauma that I actually haven't, I haven't processed yet. And it's so, it's interesting being in the space of working to make people feel like leaders and working to make people feel safe, whether they're in my community or not. And I don't even have a space to, to feel safe, to go out and hike and go out and do these things. I mean, I went on my first hike earlier last year and almost died because I just never had that practice, and I never felt like it was something that I could do. My parents never did it. I don't see my, obviously my family is not here, but yeah. What I would love to bring to the table next is I want our panelists to think of a story of when they truly felt seen and where they see and feel themselves in nature. That can be on a hike, that can be doing something outside, where the space in which we're talking about and the representation that we're talking about, the freedom and the reconnection that we're talking about actually happened for us. And I can share, a story of when I went into the China for probably the first time in my adult life, because I don't really know how to swim. And so I usually don't go out into I don't really go out into water that my feet can't touch the ground. But a friend was helping me in the China. And of course, I could not swim across the river, but I just took time to sort of center myself, because a lot of it was fear. I was like, I can't swim, I'm going to drown. I just took a second to just plant my feet on the bed of that river and, just look at my hands, and I could see the silt, going through the China. And I, could see the tiny little fish, and I could see a little bit of, the river reeds that, were touching my feet. And just in that moment, I felt, it was weird. I kind of felt like the river was speaking, was saying hi. And I, thinking of back home, I consider myself and our people and the people that we come from, ocean people or water people, that's what brings us life. And, Salenta, you sharing your name was so beautiful, because my middle name, but was going to be my first name, is Anaxana, and that means when water comes. And it's in reference to when the tide comes out and when it finally comes back in. And so it just made me feel connected. I wasn't ashamed that I couldn't swim in that moment. I wasn't ashamed that, I didn't feel right in my swimsuit and nobody else in the group looked like me, but I just felt like this river was saying hi. And that's like, it's okay. He was like, I'm not going to let you drown. I got you. I did not go across the river though, because I'm like, no, not today. But that moment was really beautiful for me. So what was a beautiful moment for you?
I have a story. I hope it doesn't rub some of you the wrong way, but I dabble in psychedelics for mental healing purposes, not for to party or to when I first took psilocybin mushrooms, I had a very deep, intense, beautiful, in the most beautiful way experience with nature. I guess a long story short, I thought I heard something tell me to come outside because I was inside. And when you take psychedelics, I recommend being outside because you'll really feel nature more than you do when you're not on it. But it's possible to get to that point even without the psychedelics. But it's a nice introduction. I went outside and outside to my friend's balcony, which had like a tree right outside of it, a really long, tall tree. And I could hear this like song coming from the tree. And I was really confused because, I'm like, this must be the psychedelics because, trees can't sing. And then I don't know why, but I just put my arms out kind of to receive the song. And the tree stretched out towards me, and we held hands, but I held like the branches, and the branches were holding me. And I just started crying because it doesn't make sense, I guess. Hearing that probably doesn't make sense, but yes, I was on psychedelics, but I was having this intimate moment with this tree that was just singing this sweet song to me and holding my hands. And I was just crying and listening. And what's funny is my friend came out to the balcony and was like, "What are you doing?" Because apparently I was just standing there like this. Like, but me, from my perception, I was holding hands with a tree and we were connecting. And one thing about psychedelics that I've learned specifically with mushrooms is that it shows you your reality. And that's why some people don't do it, because their mental state is not in the best. So when they take it, it's amplified. Versus when I took it, my mental state was, I guess, like my true self was like amplified even more, to the point where I had this connection with this tree. I don't encourage people to do psychedelics unless you know exactly what you're doing and the purpose behind it. Like I said, I use it for mental health. I used to battle with depression a lot, and I still do. And it always helps me come out of it because it shows me my reality for what it is. And it usually, most of the time, I've never had a bad trip or anything, and it's helped me return to center. But in that moment, I realized, okay, there's much more to nature than what I was perceiving before, and I'm going to investigate a bit more and try and learn more about the spiritual side of nature, because I've never experienced anything like that prior to that trip. And it also gave me a lot of mental clarity and healed me and just made me feel better at the time, because I was going through a very dark depression at the time. And yeah, it's like the tree sent me some sweet song that cured all the negative thoughts that I had, any doubt, anything that I was like questioning against myself. It like flipped the script, and it was like, no, anything is possible. You know, you are not your negative thoughts. Like, it was a very beautiful experience. And I think if that happened to some other people, they might have been scared, but you know, I wasn't scared. I was more just like in awe. That's why I think I was crying, because it's just like, what's happening right now? You know, if I tell somebody that this happens, they're going to tell me, hey, you're insane. And I'm going to be like, maybe, but I swear I just held hands with a tree and it sang to me. So I don't know, you know. But yeah, that was kind of like my first, well, I guess that wasn't my first, but as like a young adult, that was my first kind of step into it. But my mother used to tell me stories of me younger, little me, talking to trees and talking to different things. Saying like, I'd be like, oh yeah, mommy, that's a purple dog, or that's a purple person, or that tree said this, we shouldn't go over there. And she'd be like, what? She'd think that I was just, you know, I'm a kid, I'm just talking. So, but yeah, now that I'm older and I'm, you know, getting back into my childhood self, I'm learning I wasn't just talking, I was just like tapped into something else that not everybody sees every day. So yeah, that was kind of my first introduction of like intimacy with nature.
Your question was what, describing a happy, like a good experience that we've had in nature, right, Alyssa?
Sorry, I was muted. Yeah, a time where, you know, what we're of course we're not seeing in the sustainability and environmental movement, that one time where we were with ourselves where it did.
Okay, Salenta, your story was really beautiful. I also want to just add that I also microdose for my mental health. It's strictly for my mental health, and it is one of the only things that has helped me start to like unpack, you know, some of my trauma and really start to move past the barriers that my trauma has, you know, put into my life and stop me from being able to have access to happiness. So I want to thank you for sharing that, because that's really vulnerable for you to, you know, say in front of a lot of strangers, you know, and just talking about mental health in general. I think that those conversations are extremely important to have. But I will never forget this experience that I had with this girl named Kendallin. She lived in Alaska, in Fairbanks at the time. She's another Black girl that I had met, and we took our dogs out. Like, she was somebody that I used to forage with. I met her at the University of Alaska Fairbanks, and she was just wonderful. We had this whole day where we went foraging together. Like, we picked cranberries, and like and it makes me kind of emotional, because it's just like one of those days that you just never forget. Like, you just have a really beautiful experience with another like Black femme, and she's a lesbian, and it was just like such a safe and warm space. And we took our dogs out. Like, I had my puppy and she had her dog Copper, and we just, you know, we were in the fields at UAF, and like our dogs were running and like playing in the water. We were picking berries and we ate, and it was just like, it was honestly one of the most beautiful days that I've ever experienced being in nature. We hunted mushrooms, and like, I can't really describe how touched it made me. Wait, I'm probably breaking up right now, aren't I?
You're good. You're good.
Okay, cool. Yeah, it was just like we spent the day outside, just being grounded and being in each other's spaces and just bonding and just having an authentic connection as Black femmes in nature. And I will really never forget it. And that is something that has kept me, you know, pursuing my, you know, passion for sustainability and providing access to lower income Black folks, because that experience, it just made me feel like I couldn't have another bad day. And it just made me feel like I was sharing education with someone else. Like, we got a bullet mushroom, and we eventually like started to educate each other. Like, we went on the mushroom walk with Dr. Gary Larson together. And after that, our connection just got really strong, and it just felt like a really rich environment to just keep learning with another Black femme. And it just felt so safe to be in the comfort of another Black person while learning completely new information. And that person isn't judging you. Like, that person, even if they're more educated, less educated, like, we were genuinely asking each other questions, reading from, you know, the indigenous, you know, herbs, and discovering these things while we were on the walk, like looking at bane berries and like, oh no, that's poisonous, like, don't eat that one. Like, and it was just like an in real life I Spy in the forest. And I think that it just made me feel like I needed to do the work to continue to provide people with those same experiences, because it's just a memory that I will really never forget. I got beautiful pictures that day, and we cooked dinner with the mushrooms that we picked, and it was just like, it was one of the most amazing days of my life, honestly. I hope it brought you guys joy to hear about it, because it was really, it really impacted me.
So for me, there's so many experiences. But one of the richest experiences, so I lived out of my tent for almost a year in Colorado, working out there with the BLM, the Bureau of Land Management, and the Forest Service. And there was a lot of challenges. You know, living out of your tent is not, it sounds like, ooh, camping, you know, like, it sounds so great, but and it was great, but you know, I mean, you're living out of a tent, you're going 9 days at a time in the woods, cooking all your meals on a fire. And as stressful as it was the most inspired I've ever been. it was the most determined and motivated I've ever been, because I was doing work that was meaningful, but also getting that one-on-one connection with the planet as well, every day for almost a year. And that was the experience that pretty much let me know that I was in the right field. It pretty much determined how, can y'all hear me? Because everybody's frozen. Oh, y'all not frozen. Y'all just stuck like
I
that.
can hear
Okay.
you.
But yeah, so that was the experience that let me know that I was in the right field. And it was transformative only because I was surrounded by strangers. They divided us up into teams of 12, and I didn't know anyone. I was lost. Okay, we didn't know. No one knew each other, and so living with 12 strangers in the woods, you get close to them. You crack, you smile, you laugh. They see you get injured. They're the ones that help you, you know? And so that's tying this back into sustainability. That's the work that put all of that into perspective, because we did have that society, that little mini family in the nature environments that were kind of just like, it was the type of environments that you didn't expect when you said, oh, you're going to be living in the woods. And when I say I'm living in the woods, you think, oh, trees and random animals. But this was like rocky terrain, very, very hot, working in 100-degree weathers and the desert. It was a lot. And so having such a monumental experience in that team building and everyone on the same page, everyone's trying to heal the planet. Everyone understands that they have a role. And that was pretty much how I knew that I was going to be doing this kind of work for forever. So that's the short answer to that question.
Did you guys want to hear more stories, or did you guys have another question? Because I can totally share another story.
I actually have a question.
Okay.
And I just wanted to open this up to everyone on the panel here. I just want to know, so when we're thinking about sustainability, what are you going to do differently after having this discussion, you know, about all of these different stories? What are you going to take away and apply to your life once this is over, once this webinar is over?
I realized, you know, I have to use social media to my advantage, and I don't think I really do that because I don't really like to always be online. But after speaking with you all, it's like I have a voice, I have a platform, and I need to use it. So, you know, I'd say even though I just shared that, you know, spiritual psychedelic story with you all, I am kind of a private person. So I tend to like not post as much on social media. But with the activities that I do and the gardening and all the things that I'm involved with in nature, I need to share it more because I know there are people watching. There's the youth are watching. People within our age group are watching and liking the posts. I also DJ and I do stuff with music as well. But I'm like, I need to really promote more nature-based things and the activities I do because representation matters and there needs to be more Black femmes within the sustainability spectrum. So yeah, I have to kind of put my ego down and just do the work, if you will. Not to say like me being private is egotistical, but representation matters so much to me that I'm like, you know what, instead of like waiting to see that, I'm just gonna make it happen myself and also put in the work and the actions so that what we're speaking of manifests more and more and more and more for many generations, not just now. I hope there's more panels like this in the future, webinars like this in the future, so that younger Black femmes and also like men, queer people, etc., see this and they're like, I can do this too. I can be like this too. I can be different in this way and connect with the earth in this way. So thank you all so much.
Yeah, to also add to exactly what Solenta is saying, this webinar has really, and just when I did get the feature in essence, like understanding that people do want to hear the voices of Black femmes, like being in the industry could make me feel like my voice wasn't valued. I didn't back down from that because coming from immigrants, you are taught that people are gonna not like you. Like I was very, taught about racism and very educated on those things. So my parents ingrained in me like, hey, you need to be ready for X, Y, and Z. Like, and they've made me a really fearless Black femme. So it has, come to my attention through this webinar that I need to put myself out there more in terms of putting my face out there more and my activities so that people understand that, one, I am Black, and two, I am, someone who centers sustainability in my life, not just from a caring about the earth perspective.
Oh, you cut out again. You still there?
A lot of people don't know that I am, educated on herbalism and that I have, a background in ethnomycology and the things that I study because I keep them so private. But now I understand that I need to reach out more and, be more a part of these kind of webinars. I do hope that we can continue these conversations. I hope that we can continue to reach out and bring more Black femmes and Black, Black people in general into these spaces and keep cultivating these conversations where we're connecting and talking about our experiences and how we're going to combat the racism and expand, accessibility in our field, because it's unavoidable at this point and something that is absolutely necessary for future generations. And also I need to make sure that my daughter is extremely involved, not putting her on social media, by herself, but just making
Frozen again.
you have to intersect them, because sustainability and, the state of our earth plays into how we feel, how we, wake up. Like, if we don't have a healthy earth, we're not going to be healthy living beings. So I definitely just know that I need to do more with my platform and just share more, even if it's just like tincture making, because I do a lot of that, my foraging, like just sharing more and not caring so much about like who wants to see it, just more of, hey, this is what I'm doing, and if you care, that's cool. If you don't, that's also cool. Oh, it cut out when I brought up my daughter and social media. Can you guys still hear me okay?
Yes, you are good.
Okay, so you guys heard all of that?
I heard most of it.
Okay. Well, yeah, I know that I need to just use my platform more and, just show myself more. I think that, people will always have these ideas if they just are ignorant and unfamiliar with what knowledge we do have.
Yeah, thank you. I think for me, on a funny note, I will commit to helping my mother water her garden more. She is watching this webinar, so here you are, Mother. I will help you water, because I'm like, I never want to water the dang garden. she's got so many plants, and then she leaves it all for me, and then it's all hot and sweaty in the greenhouse. So I will commit to helping her more in the greenhouse. we'll make that public commitment. But other than that, I think doing more things like this, I think that recognizing, the wonderful opportunity and privilege I have as an organizer that, has the resources of an entire organization and coworkers behind me, that I could not just use the platform that I have, but I could really create a space, more spaces like these for people who look like me, people who don't look like me, people, and voices that need to be in this movement together, both on a organizing position, but also, individually. I always bring into my work, whether it's with the Alaska Center hat or not, what am I doing for the for that other small, loud short West Indian girl in Fairbanks who is in Fairbanks, and her culture is not here, her food is not here, her family isn't here. What am I doing to let her know that even though she's so far away from home, there is a space for her here? There is a community for her here, and there's people that want to hear from her and want to see her do good in whatever that she wants to do. What am I doing for that girl? What am I doing for other girls, other girls of color, other immigrant girls, other first-gen girls in our community, to know that they have a space to not just lead, but live, and live well, and what that means to be a leader, not just to your community, but to yourself. And so I always bring that into anything that I do. And this feels so good. And I know that doing more things like this is good. And it has just been such a privilege that I have the community and friends that I do, especially my Indigenous friends that have taught me so much about the lands that I'm on and what plants are here, what herbs are here. Because I can't go to a grocery store, I can't get I can't get saltfish, can't get breadfruit, but I can get salmon. And I do know what to do with shepherd's purse, and I know what to do with low bush cranberries, and that birch trees have sap. I forgot that this spring, but I remembered that they have sap, and how and I was able to teach that to my mom, because for folks that aren't in Alaska, we had another year of record-breaking pollen counts in our air. And so anybody with seasonal allergies or birch or spruce allergies, we were stuck inside, because you would go outside, you could see the pollen in the air, and you just knew that you're going to have an allergy attack. And both my mom and I have seasonal allergies. And so I was able to teach her about, spruce tips. And I went to the farmer's market and got birch water, because birch water really helps, and was able to get her some local bee pollen and be like, oh, and I kind of felt like my my great grandmother that passed, goodness, I was still in college when she passed. But she taught us a lot about our remedies back home. And so I kind of felt like Gran for a minute, of like, well, here are the remedies in Alaska, because we're not, Alaskan, we're not indigenous to these lands. So it's really hard to connect to lands that you're not indigenous on, and if that's good, and if that's, if you have space to do that, and how to do that respectfully. And so I was teaching her things that she never knew. It was like, there's bee pollen, what? And so it felt, doing more things like that, where, showing other people of color in this community that are not indigenous to these lands, this is how you harvest respectfully, and letting those indigenous folks that know that knowledge lead and really make those connections there. Because, like, regardless, we're on this land together, regardless of what our history, how our history's brought us here, or what brought us here to these places we're here. And how do we not just have good relations with ourselves to the earth, how do we have good relations to each other? How do we have good relations interculturally? And how do we bring our indigenous knowledge from the places that we come from with the indigenous knowledge that we're living on right now? So that's my commitment.
I think this webinar has showed me that I need to take up more space. I have a lot more work to do, just because I want I need this to be a founding principle for new generations to come. Like, I need them to know that environmental science and outdoor education is something that they need to know. And in order for me to establish that as, you know, one of those household things that parents teach their children, I have a lot more work to do. And so I'm going to walk away from this with a greater inspiration and motivation for my own work and for my own personal agendas within my career. As far as sustainability goes, I'm going to just keep doing what I'm doing, keep going the urban forestry route. But yes, definitely planning to take up more space. I do have the platform for it. See, I'm like the exact opposite of Salenta. Social media, I'm always on it because that's, you know, the way to communicate nowadays, especially with everything going on, this pandemic and everything. And because I know that I have that audience already, it's easy for me to talk about these topics. So I need to just do that more. So that's exactly what I'm going to start doing for sure. Oh, there's a question in the chat. Would you all mind sharing your social media handles if you have them? Yes,
we can totally do that. I mentioned, you know, in the chat as well, we can share all the, you know, all the lovely social media platforms that we're on, as well as your all's work that you're doing. If there's any ways that folks can learn more and get connected into those spaces as well, I'm more than happy to put that on our event page and have people be connected that way. I want to acknowledge that it is 1:35, and with the remaining time that we have together, I you know, want to pose this final question. And we do have a lot of folks listening on Facebook Live, so a lot of folks have had to go, but we do have a lot of folks watching us there and can still hear us there. But my sort of last question that I want to bring us in is, what do we want our, you know, our participants here on this meeting and on people listening, you know, on Facebook want to take home? You know, what are some concepts we want to leave them with? What are some stories? What are some tips that we have for folks that are maybe wanting to get into this work, but maybe don't have or know where to start, or who to listen to, or where to go?
That's a great question. Oh, who's?
Go ahead.
That's a great question. I think that the main way to get involved is to simply go outside. I'm not going to tell y'all to read books. I'm not going to tell y'all to watch a documentary. I'm just going to say go outside and learn your local flora, learn your local fauna, learn how your personal city or town works with the earth. And through that, you can establish connections with nature-based organizations or companies in your area, because it's better to have that personal just conversation with someone versus reading a book. And once you have a grasp on your own environment and your local community, you can branch out from there. But I always say start local. If you have a community garden, link with your community garden. There are a lot of nature nonprofits, and you can do a quick Google search to find out what's in your city. But definitely just go outside. And there's apps too. So if you're looking to get into herbalism or to get into spiritual healing with plants, plant alchemy, botany alchemy, or anything like that, there are a few plant identification apps. I'll write them in the chat. But download those while you're going on these random hikes or just walking around your town or city, and take a picture of a plant. And that's the easiest way to find out what it is. And then you can go back home and, dive deeper into it that way. But start by going outside. And then that's the foundation that I would build all of this on. Also, another way to get involved, volunteering with these nature organizations in your area. They always need help. The environmental industry is a big, expansive industry, but the funding isn't necessarily there. So we do rely heavily on the work of our volunteers to carry out some of the projects that we want to do. So definitely look into volunteering. Definitely go outside, get active that way. And use me as a resource. I'm sure I speak for everyone on the panel. We would love to talk to you. Use me as a resource if you need. I put my email in the chat. I'm always available to answer questions. So go outside.
Just piggybacking off of Aloe, yeah, definitely go outside, connect with your local communities, grassroots. Here in Brooklyn, there's a lot of CSAs where you can literally buy fruits, vegetables, bread, eggs from local farmers. There's community gardens that you can volunteer at. I volunteer at a Black-owned garden in Crown Heights called Tahuti Ma'at. And they work with all kinds of herbs and greens and flowers that are floral herbs that are really good for your health. Yeah, grassroots is the way to go and the way to start, and you'll learn so much just from starting off like locally. It's the best way to go. Just if you're like starting off, it's wonderful. And then you meet more people that way, and then you can venture out further together or learn more from there as well, depending on where you're located. But grassroots definitely is the way to go. I totally agree. I also have to go, unfortunately, but I wanted to say thank you all so much. This has been amazing. I appreciate you all for providing space for this. Alyssa, thank you. Thank you, the Alaska Center. Aloe, thank you. Ice, thank you so much. You all have been so wonderful.
Bye, Salenta. Thank you for coming.
Thank you, Salenta.
Thank you.
To answer that question, I am going to give you guys a documentary, but only because I think that it's so wonderful. It's just on YouTube, and it's called What Plants Talk About. I watched it when I was in high school, and it really imprinted in my memory because it talks about plants' communication patterns and how plants legitimately, release smells to communicate with bugs and different things in their environment. So you guys should definitely just watch that for fun, because I think that it will help you just, if you don't already have an empathetic, relationship with nature, understanding that these are living things that have families and roots and a very, very diverse and detailed, way of life. But I agree with everyone else. Going outside, I would say to get a journal. Most importantly, one of the things that I do when I forage, because I am so heavy in like making tinctures and just going outside, is to write down, when you start to learn about these plants, write down the ones that catch your attention and some of the remedies that you might want to make. Even if you get a book to imprint these things in your actual memory, start making your own book to hand down through generations. That's what I do with my child. Like, I document everything, no matter if it's already in a book. There's certain plants and certain things that I personally like to, prioritize in my life, like dandelion root and rhodiola and certain things for my mental health. So I would say to definitely make your own journal, start making your own sustainable, journey, and seeing what that looks like for you, especially when you travel, like in looking at different ways to get involved with, making your own lip balms or your own deodorants or things like that. Like, it just really, really helps when you start to take sustainability in your own hands, by understand that you have the capability to start to integrate little things into your life, and of course, looking at what you can already do with what you have, not going and buying something new, because that's not sustainable. You want to use what you have. So figuring out how you can keep integrating these things by not contributing to more waste, you know, and because of the current pandemic, we all have to think about, you know, in what ways can we become more self-sufficient? And if you're in Alaska, and if you're not in Alaska too, you can use the Cooperative Extension's website. I'm sure they have a lot of extensive resources about different plants and herbs. You know, a lot of them are indigenous to Alaska, but if you need them for just education purposes, they have things about gardening and stuff like that. So get on the Cooperative Extension's website, and I can send that in the chat, and just educate yourself. But going outside 100%, like just learning what's around you and what you can do with it is extremely empowering.
I do want to add another great tool is Leave No Trace. And I'm a master educator for Leave No Trace, so this is a shameless plug. Shout out to Leave No Trace, okay? Get familiar with the 7 principles. If you are going to forage and you're going to take from the earth, which isn't a bad thing, you know, just have to do it ethically. Just look into the principles, look into proper foraging techniques too. There is a food forest here in Atlanta, and I have witnessed people go in there to harvest or forage some herbs and they kill the plant. So I just want you to be more mindful if you are going to forage, just do it the right way. About 67% of the ecosystem in cities is natural regeneration, and 33% is planted. So if you're taking from these urban forests, just be mindful of what you're taking and how you're taking it too. But foraging is a great resource. It's a great way to connect to the earth and use what the earth provides for your own benefit. So yeah, I definitely agree with Eyes on that. Get into foraging.
And don't use like those harsh berry pickers, guys. Like, I just gotta say that, you know, real quick. And put bibs on your cats if you have cats. Like, cat bibs are a thing, but cats, like, just to say, I'm like trying to advocate for birds real quick. Cats like kill like most songbirds. So put bibs on your cats. Just gotta say that for you.
Yeah, thank you both. Things that I would, you know, love for folks to take home. A lot of where I sort of dive into this work is helping people begin zero waste practices. And I know that folks who here in Alaska, they're like, is that even possible? And I will be real that there are a lot of barriers, like the recycling that we do have isn't really recycling. A lot of the products that you need or that you feel that you would need to start this journey, you got to get off of Amazon because there's no place that sells them here. So, you know, so it's really about reimagining exactly what we feel that we need and having and developing that relationship of what we're actually consuming and using. And so a lot of the work that I do is helping people make their events less pollutant. And how do you incorporate those things into your life, into your daily life? And one of the best exercises that I have is literally carry your trash around with you. Like, have a bag and put all of your trash with you in that bag for a day. You can do it for a day. I've had people do it for a week. Some people go really hard into it. They do it for a month. You know, I've done this exercise many different points in my life. And what I have found is that the first time I did it, a lot of my trash was plastics and papers. And when I sorted out my trash, I figured out, oh, a lot of the plastics that I'm using are single use, obviously, but it's like to-go cups, you know, things from gas stations, things from like the little like quick markets. And a lot of the paper was sticky notes and like things that I was doing for work. And so what that helped me realize is that, you know, and this was a point in my life where I was still in college and, you know, my life was on the go. It's like, oh, I'm living in a space of convenience. Like, I was not eating in the ways that I should. I was eating all things packaged and convenience. And I was working in a way that was quick, instead of really thinking about, really planning ahead. I was planning ahead for my job, and I was planning ahead for school, and I was planning ahead for everything else but me, what I was putting into my body. And it took me doing that exercise for me to recognize that and be able to, you know, make the changes that I need to make sure that I was eating the things that I actually wanted to eat, and not just something and because I hadn't eaten in 8 hours and felt like I was going to pass out. And so I welcome everybody who is watching and who is still a part of this meeting to try that exercise. I'm going to put in the chat a series, Zero Waste Journey with Joyce, if you are a BuzzFeed junkie like me, and I will admit that. You can shame me later, but I love BuzzFeed series sometimes. Joyce is also a Caribbean American woman, and they do a lot. They're doing their own zero waste journey, and I think the main reason why, you know, we don't see a lot of other people of color doing this is because we don't see ourselves in the movement, so we don't think it's something we can do. And so this really made me feel good to see another person of color and another Caribbean woman trying to do the same thing. And so I welcome you to watch that series, and I will share some tricks. Like Lynette said in the chat, yes, I do. You see what? You see this? What is it right here? This ice cream container. Your grands knew what they were talking. So all the memes that we see about them keeping the butter containers and the Cool Whip containers, they knew. You know what you can use this for? You don't have to use styrofoam to go when you go out to eat. You can just grab you one of these. All like the things that you get from quickie markets, the weird little containers. You can even buy like stronger ones. Use this stuff and bring it with you. You know, there's a lot of confusion of like, oh, can you use your container in, you know, in a restaurant, and is that okay? And can I bring my reusable cup? And that really depends from state to state. But in Alaska, you can, as long as you bring it in with you, you can use whatever you want. Once the food is given to you, you can put your leftovers in a container. You know, that you have that right. And you know, also using reusable cloths. I shout out to Northern Center. They gave me a whole bunch to not just use for the events that we were putting on, but also for myself as well. I have not used paper towels in almost 2 years. And yes, I mean during this pandemic as well. So I'm doing all of my sanitation, both for the spaces that I use and my own body. You know, reusable. And so think about like if you do that trash exercise, think about the things that you're using that's disposable, the razors that are disposable, the you know, the face cloths that are disposable, and think about what are alternatives that I could really just wash. You know, what are things that I could just use again? And of course, that's going to be a journey. Like like we've said, I'm so happy to be a resource if you are wanting to do that same thing and you don't really know where to go, where to, you know, how to get things, how you can make them. Absolutely, please reach out to me. I mean, that's part of like what I do in my own time. But that's what I would love for you all to take away is think about things that you can make yourself, think about things that you can reuse and cut out, and really start looking when you're doing your researching, looking at resources and leaders and people of color, and get, you know, and gain this same sort of perspective that we've talked about from their eyes, because that's really going to broaden, you know, your perspective and the things that you're thinking about. If you can be learning from all different types of people, from all different walks of life, from all across the world, because it's not just, you know, our cute little skinny white men with their extra tufts and their hats and, you know, they're out there on a trail. Like it's people like us as well.
And I want to add to this by, you know, saying that when you order online, challenge some of these companies with their packaging and how much packaging that they send you, because businesses do it. They let, you know, they call companies and say, hey, I'm not going to support you and I'm not going to mass order from you if you continue using XYZ for your packaging. Challenge businesses too. When I lived in Alaska, this creperie is one business that I had a problem and they had styrofoam, and they switched to paper boxes because I complained about it and I was eating there so much. And I would literally just walk out with the crepe in my hand because I didn't want the styrofoam, and they started to like look at me weird, and eventually they switched. But know that you can make a difference, and know that it takes, you know, a few, or just not even a few people, one person concerned and one person that is a consistent customer to make a business prioritize sustainability. Because, you know, we can do it at our level, but it's these corporations and these large, you know, factories that are mass producing things that are going into the landfill that we really need to combat. And also focusing on yourself too more, like make sure that you're not being ableist and classist in your sustainability, you know, talks. And when you're advocating for sustainability, making sure that you're not being impractical, you know, just telling people, hey, stop buying from Amazon, because Amazon is much cheaper a lot of the time than your local grocery store, especially when people have issues with environmental racism and they don't have, you know, things like Whole Foods that are very close to them and they need things fast. Make sure that you are being considerate and compassionate to the fact that, you know, lower income people are struggling with sustainability because they legitimately can't focus on being sustainable because there are so many barriers in their day-to-day life. And trying to help, if you actually want, you know, certain demographics to be able to feel more empowered and be able to walk into the path of sustainability, help, you know, like don't just be on your high horse and criticize people. Figure out what you can do. If you have privilege and you have land, can you start a garden? Can you figure out what you can do, you know, because there's always more that all of us can do, especially if we have privilege and we have education.
Absolutely. Well, we are at 1:55, and I want to leave some space if folks have any questions, if they want to put them in the chat, if we can answer them really quickly. But I feel we've been answering questions throughout as well. So yeah, if you want to take a second to write your questions in the chat, and if not, we can end here and have all of you enjoy the rest of your day. Go outside and look at, you know, what plants are around your house and your area. Do not pick from your neighbor's garden. Do not get me in trouble with your neighbors, okay? They don't know where I live. Do not have people out there looking for me because you out there trying to get somebody's lilacs, okay? With permission and with respect, you forage with permission and with respect, okay? Any questions? Final thoughts?
I do want to say, make sure y'all get our emails from the event page. Please be in contact. If you live in Atlanta, I am here. I would love to show you the food forest. A lot of people don't really know that the food forest is here. So I would love to show you that. I would love to show you a lot of the local flora and fauna. So get my email and keep in touch.
Definitely. I'm very grateful. I just want to say that I'm so grateful for this space. Thank you guys so much. Like, Aloe, it was wonderful talking to you. You are so educated, and I can't wait to connect with you because, you know, I'm new here and I would love, you know, to have someone who is needed, you know, in Atlanta teach me the ropes and how to get involved more in gardening and sustainability from this city perspective.
I got you. Just let me know.
All right, well, thank you all so much again. Thank you for coming on us with this journey. It has been a pretty, a beautiful and wonderful time to be able to share our knowledge and stories with you. Again, we'll put our contact information and our work in the event page, so you can all get connected with what we're doing right here in Fairbanks and in Atlanta and in New York, where Solenta is at. With that, go outside, take care of yourself, drink water, please. Wear your mask and wash your hands. Woot.
All right, y'all.
Bye. Thank you guys so much. I will send you guys the messages, Aloe and Alyssa. Thank you guys.
Yeah, no worries. Thank you. I will, still got some folks here, but that's okay. We can be transparent. I will send y'all the recording of this so that you can use it, share it however you need.
All right. Thanks everyone for coming. Thanks the Alaska Center. This was fun.
Thank you. Thank you. Especially with the time difference.
Right.
Thank you, the Alaska Center. Goodbye, guys. Have a good rest of your afternoon. Make sure you get outside. I shared the Cooperative Extension's website in the chat, so use that if you're in Alaska because it has a lot of valuable resources and education.
Bye-bye.